Thank you very much, Chairman Warren. I appreciate it. This is a fascinating and important hearing, and I'm delighted to have these terrific witnesses here. Facebook and Google have been profiting off some of the worst propagators, I guess you'd call it, of climate denial. The Center for Countering Digital Hate finds 10 fringe sites that fuel 69% of climate disinformation on Facebook. So with a little bit of focus, they could address this problem if it's only 10 major propagators. Google itself makes millions from Google ads that it runs alongside climate denial content as if it were legitimate. Mr. Lin, can you talk a bit about how our information ecosystem suffers when a handful of companies control what people see and how they perceive reality, what a communications monopoly means in a world in which there is so much deliberate climate denial propagated by industry?
Thank you, Senator. Yes, this is a fundamentally important issue. I mean, what we see today, one way to answer the question is to understand that Google and Facebook today these are the communications corporations of the 21st century. These are the AT&Ts and the Western Unions of the 21st century. AT&T and Western Union, they were prohibited by law from manipulating how people spoke to one another. Google and Facebook, their business model is based on manipulation. The reason they take in the data is in order to manipulate you. They are massive manipulation machines. The way they make their money is by renting out the manipulation machines and calling that the money that they receive, they call it advertising. So what we have is in the midst of our society, rather than sort of networks that connect people and empower people to speak with one another and interact with one another, we have machines that are designed to set people into conflict with one another, to feed them false information, to determine how people vote, and so what we have, yeah.
So they're ready, willing, and able tools for false information propagators.
When they were established, I think the idea was that these systems would be used by Procter & Gamble to sell soap and Tide. What they now do, however, is they rent themselves out to Vladimir Putin, to climate deniers, to the Chinese Communist Party, whoever comes along.
Let me switch to the data that you're talking about that they have gathered and ask the witnesses who spoke about data privacy and data brokers. What does somebody listening to this hearing need to know about what companies know about them, what data brokers can extract from what companies know about them to sell, and to what extent that information can be individualized back to them, potentially by foreign bad actors, foreign governments? Mr. Sherman is going for his microphone. Go ahead.
Data brokers know everything about pretty much every American. Where you work, where your kids go to school, how much money you make, your race, your religion, your sexual orientation. And their entire business model is that they can target this to individuals. They sell this data, they offer advertising, like Mr. Lin mentioned, for the purposes of targeting specific individuals. And so these profiles are out there on the open market for sale.
And if you were running a psychological warfare operation involving American public officials or American CEOs or various kinds of decision makers in American society, how valuable a tool would that be if you were a foreign government to be able to look into people's lives and understand not only what you directly know, but what conclusions you can realistically draw about what their shopping habits are and so forth?
Incredibly valuable for that threat actor. You can buy databases right now of what people search online, how they vote, what they think, and so it's all out there on the open market.
My time is up. Thank you, Chair Warren. If I could, I'd just add one question for the record, so as not to take up too much time. But one of the things we hear in the Finance Committee a lot, our chairman has joined us, Chairman Wyden, and he's very active on this subject, is that if we make big American companies pay a fair share in taxes, that will make them uncompetitive against foreign big companies. And that's the argument our Republican friends always make. What they ignore is that when big American companies don't pay a fair tax burden, that gives them competitive advantage over smaller American companies. And obviously that plays out in this tech world because you have Apple and Google who've come up with, what do they call them? The double Irish and the Dutch sandwich and all these peculiar tax tricks that they use to avoid paying their fair share. And I'd be interested in your views, again in writing and not now because my time has expired, in how that creates competitive disadvantage with potential contenders against them for competitive advantage in the U.S., and to what extent it locks in financially some of their monopolistic power because, frankly, they put themselves into a place where they don't have to pay taxes, but all their competitors have to, or all their smaller competitors have to. Yeah. Thanks very much. Appreciate the attention to that question in writing.